Now we're going to start with the evaluation of the wrist. And the evaluation of the wrist, it's nice to start with the patient in a relaxed position, putting some sort of bump or towel underneath the wrist to give yourself a little bit of flexion of the wrist. And again, our landmarks are, we're going to start over on the radial side. So we're going to do the extensor compartment, starting from the radial side, do one, extending across the dorsum of the wrist to the sixth extensor compartment. So our transducer will be placed in a short axis across the dorsum part of the wrist. And we'll start with the wrist in a little bit of, with the ulnar side down, and place the transducer in a short axis on the radial side of the wrist. Now, there are multiple ways that you can look at the wrist and find the extensor compartments. And one of the easiest that I found out is if you start on the Lister's tubercle, which is on the dorsum part of the wrist, and we're going to see a little bone landmark right underneath the diamond, which is Lister's tubercle, a little bony prominence sitting on top of the radius. Now, once I've located that prominence on the wrist, just to the left of that, or ulnar to that, you're going to see a round tendon structure that is actually the third extensor compartment. And how do I know that? The third extensor compartment controls the thumb. So if I move the thumb, you can see the tiny movement in short axis of the extensor pollicis longus. Now, once I've located that, Lister's tubercle is one of the more easily identifiable landmarks. I'm going to turn the wrist towards the radial side, so you're going to see Lister's tubercle roll out of the field of view. And now I'm going to go into the second extensor compartment, which is the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis. That's the brevis, and the longus is next to the arrow. If I continue to hold the transducer still and turn the wrist more onto the ulnar side, I'm going to come into the first extensor compartment, which is the area of the adductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis. Now, once I've identified those, I simply turn my transducer and evaluate those in a long axis. Find the radial stylus, and we can see that there is the first extensor compartment in long axis sitting on top of the radius. Once again, rotating the wrist back, the first extensor compartment disappears, and then the tendons of the second extensor compartment come into view. Continuing the radial rotation of the wrist, I'm going to come up onto Lister's tubercle again. There's Lister's tubercle, that little bony prominence. And then as I continue the rotation of the wrist, I get into the third extensor compartment, or the extensor pollicis longus. So that's one of the easiest ways to find the extensor compartments, by holding a transducer still and actually manipulating the wrist. One more time, I'm going to turn the transducer back into a short axis. We'll locate Lister's tubercle once again. We'll find the extensor pollicis longus tendon adjacent to Lister's tubercle. And now we're going to turn the wrist towards the radial side, and we're going to get into the fourth extensor compartment, which is the extensor indicis and commonis. And those tendons are what control the middle finger and the indicis, which controls the index finger.